What is going on? It is your boy Swixx. Just want to do a quick little track breakdown of something I've been working on a lot lately. This is a track called Ain't It. This is something I started a couple weeks ago. Um, Something that I've really enjoyed working on. There's some little tips and tricks I have in here that might help some people. Who knows? You kind of wanted to show how I work in Ableton, even though this project file is kind of a mess. Um, but yeah, this is kind of the direction I'm starting to go with the Swixx project. This is a UK bass house track. Um, yeah, let's just get this started. Yeah, y'all get the gist. Yeah, let's get right into it. My drums aren't anything crazy. It's just the most stereotypical house pattern you could ever expect to hear in your life. Um, Kicks, claps, hats, like it's boots and cats music. I had a lot of fun writing this. The drums are fun to write. Do your drums in audio. Quit fucking doing your drums in MIDI. I was a MIDI drum guy for a long time and stopped doing that immediately. Um, yeah, drums are pretty simple. The only real processing I have going on is a transient shaper, just to kind of get the drums to cut through the rest of the mix a little bit sharper. Um, make sure your drums knock. It's the easiest way to make sure your drums knock is transient shaping and saturation. Some compression is always good too, if it fits. I usually use Ableton's drum full parallel preset and adjust accordingly. This one didn't need it. My track with Narc, those drums are done that way. Doesn't always need it. It's not always essential. These sat really well in the mix, pretty unprocessed, so there's real no need to go crazy with the post processing you don't need to. Um, in the intro, I just have a really harsh EQ, taking out a lot of frequencies of the kick, the clap, and my hats down here. Um, just to kind of it sets the drums back and kind of lets the intro synths shine in a way. Doing it that way made things in my intro stand out a little bit more. Um, and they don't get unfiltered until in here. And then all I've got is an auto filter on my kick pulling out a lot of the high end frequencies as the build goes on. Um, just to kind of get that pulsing side chain through everything, but without having a super harsh kick in there. And then yeah, this is just how my drums look for my drops nowadays. Um, there's some elements taken in and out to add emphasis on other elements. Um, yeah, this is just basic house music drums. So nothing crazy there. My MIDI files up here are just triggers for my sidechain. I use Shaperbox for my sidechain. Um, really enjoy Shaperbox. I'm not a fan of compression sidechaining. Shaperbox allows me to draw how I want my sidechain to react. The routing's a little funny, but Shaperbox definitely worth the money. Something else is with Shaperbox, you need to make sure all of your elements are divided correctly. So like here I've got my basses, my sub, my intro stuff, my effects, and my vocals, and all of them are sidechained differently. So like you saw, my sidechain for my basses group is pretty quick and tight. My sub sidechain's a lot wider. Um, my intro sidechain is super wide, and that just kind of adds that pulse, and it adds a little. It makes the track breathe a little bit without really having to do much. My FX sidechain's pretty wide. Yeah, it's pretty wide. Um, my basis sidechain is tight because I didn't want to lose the transient hit on my LFO shape through serum to a super wide sidechain. And I could get around it pretty easily if I added, I don't know, 10 milliseconds of delay. So I go through here and just delay everything 10 milliseconds or 12 milliseconds, um, and shift everything off grid just a little bit. But I liked the symmetry of the synth flow and didn't want to mess that up too much. Yeah, so drums are simple. Just make sure they knock. It's really embarrassing to write a track and think your drums are gonna hit, and then you go play it on a system for the first time and they sound like mushy dog shit. I've been in that position. Not a good feeling. Um, Make sure your side chains are wide enough that your synths aren't eating up all of the tonal factor of your drums, um, which is really easy because everybody wants, like in an ideal world, a super quick side chain with super snappy drums makes sense. Um, but it's not realistic because you have multiple elements happening at the same time. So it's not always that easy to just draw a quick little side chain and make it work. You'll lose a lot of you'll lose a lot of volume in your drums. You'll get some really harsh frequency clashing happening between your drums and whatever else is playing. Um, and you don't want that, especially once you get it outside of your computer and get it on a system or get it in the car when you're starting to reference the track before you release it. You'll start to notice that side chain's too fast, and a lot of the body of the drums gets eaten up due to the body of the synths or the body of whatever else is happening in the background or in the forefront. Your drums are carrying what happens in the forefront. Okay, and on to the intro. And this is where some of the tips and tricks that I've taught myself have really come into play. I'm not a big MIDI guy. I don't like doing arrangement in MIDI. I would much rather do everything in audio. Um, but for house music, it's a little more difficult because there is a lot more musicality to it. Versus doing dubstep where you can get away with 16 D notes in a row and making one sound cool in D and then bouncing it to audio and just arranging it that way is a lot easier. With house, it isn't quite as easy. Um, but yeah, so the intro is only a handful of elements. So I've got some atmospheric stuff up here. I've got my Reese's down here. Um, I've got some little loops, and I'll explain why these are here in a minute. Um, and then this chopped up shit down here. And this is where I tend to have the most fun writing melodies, is doing this. Um, so originally, this entire project was really just a sound design template. Was working on writing melodies that I could use in other things and doing some sound design for UK based stuff. Um, and it kind of evolved into what it is now. And the track, what's funny is I've been listening to a lot of stuff, specifically a track called Bacardi by Subterra. And that track is it's super simple fundamentally, but it just worked. And big fan of, I mean, you don't have 800 elements happening at the same time. You've just got one synth that flows really well. And kind of wanted to go for something that style. Um, and yeah, so when I got into the intro part, I had kind of an idea of the direction I wanted to go once I moved past just like the sound design template idea. And this is what I got to. So I found this really cool little guitar pattern, and I'm pretty sure this is stock in Ableton. Um, Yeah, so just a really cool little flowy guitar. Um, and I ran it through a plugin called Portal, which is a granular synth. Um, and what Portal is going to do is grab individual grains of whatever is playing through it and manipulate them accordingly. Um, it's really fun to reprocess stuff with Portal, especially if you're kind of like a creative halt sound wise. Bouncing stuff through a granular synth can respark ideas. So I ran it through one of Portal's presets. All of the Portal presets are super, super good. Um, I do a lot of my stuff in the guitar and key section because it seems to just manipulate pitch most of the time. Most of this stuff is just pitch based, um, which is perfect, which is perfect. So it'll keep everything in key, but manipulate pitch within the same key range. And once I ran it through Portal, yeah, so I ran it through Portal, started to get some ideas, bounced it to audio. This is what came out. Yeah, that's what came out, and decided I was just gonna chop and screw this into Oblivion, and came up with a flow that I have fallen in love with. Like I love the way this entire flow came out. Um, yeah, so this is what I got from reprocessing a loop. Yeah, really enjoyed how that came out. I think it sounded really cool and it fit really well with the rest of the vibe. Um, processing on it's pretty simple, just the hybrid reverb to kind of give it some air with a pretty, this is a pretty long decay time for what I do most of the time. So I'm usually around 200 milliseconds. This being almost a full second's a lot of decay. And then I'm EQing out the low end so that Reese can really breathe and the low end of my drums can still hit. Um, yeah, just a lot of subtractive EQing through all of this. Kept this little piece because I liked how it flowed with this, because the downside to using things like Portal is it can create something once and you can keep trying to create it again with the same preset and you may never get it to create again. Um, so now every time this plays, it plays a little bit differently, but it doesn't play like this, and it certainly doesn't play like this. And so the way everything sat together was really cool, and it added a lot of cool sparkly harmonics in here that weren't there before with just the little guitar pattern. Um, and then I added another one that was a little too extreme, so deleted it, and then just added the same thing, just um, EQ'd, added a disperser. Disperser is a plugin from Kilohertz that I use on almost everything. It'll grab a specific frequency that you select and reverse phase through it. So it kind of makes this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a saturator, phaser, flanger all stuck into one, but it's super clean. So that's with disperser. It makes it like jelly. It's kind of like jelly, but it's the same thing. It's just yeah, just detuned an octave. Um, or that's this one. Yeah, same thing, just turned down an octave, just so it sat in its own little element by itself, and it's sitting down a little closer to the frequency range where the Reese is gonna sit. Um, Reese design is super easy. Um, it's just a detuned saw. The only thing that I would recommend with a Reese is make sure your unison is always on an odd number, so that center harmonic, so that 1 3 5 7, there's always a center, so there's equal detuning on both sides of that center harmonic. Once you start getting to even numbers, it gets a little messy, and that's not my favorite thing. Um, yeah, just some distortion, hyperdimension to add some more detuning, and flanger that's really just adding a lot of depth. Um, and a little bit of phase manipulation so you get some movement out of the Reese without really having to oscillate anything. Then the only thing I have going on here is a filter. I'm on the wrong thing. Yeah, the only thing I really have going on is a filter, just to filter out a lot of the high-end stuff. And the filter can be manipulated here. Yeah, nothing crazy going on, nothing crazy going on in the global section of Serum or anything like that. Up here, this is just a big womp, just a big filter cut ambient sound that added just another loud or another layer to the harmonic. And then we get into some siny pads that are ultimately just used for atmosphere. Atmosphere is important in everything you do in music, and knowing how to utilize it correctly is important. So I have 3 layers of atmosphere here. That's just crazy, crazy downsampled. It's really just 2 fucked up sines ran into each other, detuned, with some distortion, chorus, delay, reverb, and a filter. Distortion, obviously, chorus just adds some body to it and gets some movement. Delay is just for when the sound stops, you get the cool ping pong effect. Reverb is reverb, obviously, and then a ring mod adds a lot of really harsh harmonics to anything. Any sort of ring mod, reverb, filter, anything like that is just going to add super sharp harmonic points, so you get some really cool tonality out of something that would be relatively atonal otherwise. Yeah, so there's that. This is the same pad, just processed differently. We got this one, which is the same as the top one, just ran through Portal. Yeah, and that's all I've really got for the intro. Effects are effects. All I've really got to say about effects is make sure you always have things moving in here. I do have some more atmosphere down here. Effects are good. You should use them 100%. Effects will kind of keep your track moving and make your track feel like it's able to stand on its own and it'll move on its own, which is important, especially in electronic music. Okay, vocals. Something I have recently started doing with my vocals is using kilohertz ensemble to spread out the stereo field of whatever's playing through it. So most of the time, vocals are mono. They're going to sit in the middle of the mix. But with things like Reese's and everything else sitting damn near dead middle of the mix, I've started to use this to pull my vocals out really wide and get them to sit really far left field and right field in the stereo field. Yeah, so just pulled everything out super wide, doing the same thing here. Just to get it super wide, I bounced this with a bunch of reverb on it to kind of add this sweep into it. That's a cool little trick I can show you really quick. So we're gonna go here. No, wrong button. Go here, here. I'm gonna grab this. Grab hybrid or whatever reverb you want to use. It's your choice. Turn dry wet up super high, so like 80%, decay up, crazy high. This I need. And then what you'll do is, if I can find the button, freeze. You're gonna freeze and flatten it, and then you're gonna reverse that reverb. Or you're gonna cut out part of that reverb, consolidate it, and then reverse it. And it'll kind of act as a sweep. And the best part about it is it already came from the sound that you're using. So doing it this way, it's a sweeper that's in key. It's gonna fit. It's gonna work. And it's easy. It takes 2 seconds. if it would ever freeze, now it's gonna have a crazy long reverb tail, which isn't necessarily the best thing, but we're gonna flatten it. So now we've got this super, super crazy long reverb tail. But what we can do here is just grab this, delete this stuff right here. I'm gonna consolidate this. I should really learn the keyboard shortcuts. You press R to reverse it, and you bring it down here. And that's how you make a so you make a little reverse sweep or reverse swell, and even go a mile further. Just go here, here, do something like this. Yeah, so you do that. Yeah, so there's all that stuff. Nothing too crazy going on in the vocal section. Just have the same vocal kind of just going in and out through the entire track. Just turned down and sat back in the mix a little bit. Let's get into the basses. So in the build up here, something I do on a lot of my tracks is I'll tease, I call it teasing the main synth. So once we get out of the intro, yeah, so I've got what would be the basis to the track. So I've got a bunch of like extra MIDI information going on here. Yeah, what would be the basis of the track? Just get teased in the intro, and it kind of adds like an element of anticipation because you can finally hear what's coming. Yeah, and the way I do that is just with reverb. So reverb 3.5 seconds of decay, super like middle of the pack, dry wet. I use hybrid reverb for everything now. I don't use Ableton stock reverb. I fucking hate it. But hybrid reverb in Ableton 11 is sick. 10 out of 10. But yeah, so we start getting things that are getting teased. They're turned down a lot. So everything's down about 13 decibels or 14 decibels, and you start climbing in volume the closer you get to the drop. If I could actually see what I'm trying to do, mixer, track volume. Yeah, so things are climbing, climbing, climbing. You get to about 10 decibels, and then you're here. And all I'm doing is it's just teasing. It's just little pieces of whatever flow you have going on in the drop. This entire drop is really only 3 layers. Once again, I had referenced Subterra's Bacardi, and that honestly might not be a bad track to show off right now. So we'll go here. Yeah, not a bad track to show off. We'll go. Give me just a second. I don't know if this shit's gonna get copyright struck now. Would be really shitty if it did, but like who really cares? Go here. Okay. Just gotta get this shit to open really quick. Subterra is definitely one of my favorite producers right now. Based out of Canada. Dude's fucked in the head. Yeah, this is one of his releases from this year on 3000 bass, and his flow in this track is genuinely, it's crazy. This dude's flow is crazy. Yeah, that was kind of my inspiration for this track, was that track right there. Big Subterra fan. But my flow is significantly different. Sound design is pretty different. But you get the gist. But once we get into the drop, my work here is pretty simple, but that's kind of where I got the idea of keeping it as simple as it is. Yeah, so it's really only a couple layers going on. So I've got this layer, which is really just filling out a lot of the low mid stuff. This is my high end layer. And then this is like a down sampled version of the same high end layer. Just, I was about to start finishing this track and noticed that there was something missing and I couldn't figure out what it was. Went and just duplicated this layer and threw a fuck ton of processing at it. So there's a bunch of processing. The big thing happening is Redux. Redux is just downsampling at a specific frequency range, and it just added a little bit of high-end sparkle that was missing, and a little bit of fuzziness that was missing from the synths, because this synth by itself is really, really simple and really, really clean. It was missing some character, and this really filled the rest of that out. But yeah, let's get into some of the synth work. So there's a cool thing happening in this synth that happens every now and then. So the rate is set to 1/4 triplets. And when that happens, there's this weird reverb flick effect that happens because my MIDI note is drawn a little bit longer than it should be. And you get this cool womp in the back end. So like right here is where one would happen. So we'll just, that super high pitched womp was not done on purpose. And all that is just a reverb signal throw because it's trying to play the next instance of what would be the LFO, and it can't, so it just flicks the reverb. That was really cool effect. That's happening through there, and this track is just a lot of like, it's just synth play and figuring out synth flow. Yeah, it wasn't, none of the sound design is crazy heavy or intensive. Most of my sound design is done with basic shapes. So we got a sine and a saw. Really nothing crazy heavy happening in the processing either. You feel free to copy whatever the fuck you want out of this. Yeah, nothing crazy really happening out of any of these synths. And then this is the same as this one. One thing that was hard to adapt to when I started writing UK bass was getting out of the mindset that everything is an FM synth. Not everything is frequency modulation. A lot of it's just wave shaping. So a lot of it's just really two wavetables making noise, and that's it. So I don't have anything really, there's no FM from B, no FM from A, no anything like that happening. It's just wave shaping, which makes things really easy because I went into this thinking that like these are all super complex FM synths. The sound design is going to be really hard to nail, and it's not. The sound design is super, super simple. A lot of the weight just comes from your post-processing. And in this instance, my post-processing really isn't that heavy. I have a saturator doing digital clip, turned up a couple decibels, a disperser, same frequency, D4. little bit of reverb, an EQ boosting the dog shit out of the mids and the highs, another saturator, and a transient shaper. So most of the body of the sound is coming from the saturators, and it's just helping push everything. But that's where most of the heavy lifting in UK bass comes from, is your processing. And that's something I had to really break my mind out of, was all of these are complex. All of these synths are hard to make. Um, and then understanding your scales. So this being in D minor, once you understand your scales, it's pretty easy, and it's just finding a flow that really works. Um, and making sure it kind of just it's a bot, man, that it moves. And yeah, once I got to this point, once I had made this, it was over. The rest of the track came together super easy. The one big thing is my subgroup is isolated from my basses group. Um, I do all of my subs separately from my basses, and this is a stock just sub sign that's in Ableton with a touch of drop. Um, and that's really it. My attack and release are adjusted accordingly, so it's not so harsh. And then I've got a topper that I made, once again, just to add another layer of character to the track. Um, Nothing crazy. Like, none of this track is super crazy. And in my opinion, it worked. Everything I did worked. Like this idea. And then for my transitional section, something that I've been doing a lot lately is just big reverb flicks and washing out one part of whatever you have playing. So I've got a giant reverb flick here that's completely blowing out this high-end synth. So it's letting this one come through the rest of the way. Yeah, so we got yeah. Yeah, so that's the first drop. Second drop is just a complete different synth flow, with some elements of the first drop brought back. So the first 16 bars are completely different, but the other 16 bars are identical to the first half, just to bring back just a nice callback to the first drop. There's no point in doing two completely different flows. Like, there's no point. Yeah, that's really it. Like, to keep it stupid simple and keep it halfway digestible. Yeah, especially for things like UK bass or just house music in general, understanding your scales, understanding your drum flow, and just overall synth flow is more important than it is in dubstep. Like, me writing dubstep for the last few years has really made me like what I thought would be like a one-trick pony, where you can get away with quarter notes and sustains, and that shit makes things super easy. But this is kind of a different realm. There's a lot more musicality here. Yeah, and that's really all I got for this one. If y'all want me to break down any of my other music, please let me know in the comments. Yeah, I can break down just about anything. I can do some drum and bass stuff. I can do some dubstep stuff. Yeah, just let me know. I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.